Everyone on the 20th floor pretended not to stare when the billionaire snapped. "Who touched my laptop?" Victoria Hale's voice cut through the open office like a blade. "Who touched my system without clearance?" The entire product team went silent. Keyboards stopped. Coffee cups froze halfway to lips. At the far end of the room, a man in a faded navy polo tightened his grip on a black backpack. He knew the ticket number. He knew the serial code. He knew exactly which laptop she was talking about, because he was the one who'd fixed it. The assistant at her glass door called out, panic in his eyes. "Whoever worked on Ms. Hale's machine, step in, now." No one moved. Then the assistant's gaze found him. "You. Get in here. Now." Ethan Cole swallowed. His throat felt made of sand. If he stayed in his invisible corner, maybe this would blow over. If he walked into that office, he might walk back out unemployed. But his daughter's face flashed in his mind. Brown curls, missing front tooth, the spark in her eyes when she'd asked at breakfast, "Daddy, will we still be able to go to the art fair if you fix more computers this week?" He couldn't afford unemployed. He also couldn't afford to run. Ethan stepped out from behind the row of cubicles, every eye on the floor following him like he'd just volunteered for an execution. As he walked toward Victoria's corner office, the only one with a view of the river and 2 private balconies, he caught the reflection of himself in the glass. Early 30s, a day's stubble, circles under his eyes, company-issued lanyard, and a shirt his sister said made him look tired for a living. The door clicked shut behind him. Victoria Hale stood with her back to him, facing the floor-to-ceiling windows. Chicago's skyline stretched beyond her, all steel and glass and late morning haze. On her desk, a silver laptop sat open, screen glowing. Ethan couldn't see what was on it. Not yet. "Name," she said, still facing the window. "Ethan Cole. Infrastructure support." She turned then. Every photo he'd ever seen of her, on business magazines, on the company website, in investor decks, had the same look. Sharp, polished, untouchable. In person, the effect was worse, or better. It depended on how much you liked feeling immediately 5 inches shorter. Her eyes flicked to his ID badge, then to his face. "You rebuilt my OS this morning." "I did," Ethan said. "Ticket 33927. You were having intermittent kernel panics. We backed up your data, flashed a clean image, restored your profile from last night's off-site backup." "I know what you did," she said. "What I want to know is why my lock screen is showing that." She stepped aside so he could see the laptop screen. It wasn't the corporate logo. It wasn't the standard blue gradient with the Hale Dynamics brand mark every executive used. It was a photograph. A woman standing in front of a small brick house with peeling white trim. She was in jeans and a t-shirt, hair in a loose braid, laughing at something out of frame. A little boy's hand clutched her fingers, half cut off along the edge of the photo. There was a hand-painted mailbox beside the door with the number 4112 slanted in black. The woman was Victoria. Except not. This version of her had freckles across her nose, a smudge of paint on one cheek, and actual sun on her skin. No makeup, no jewelry, no armor. Ethan's hand froze on the back of the chair. He hadn't meant to see it earlier that morning. The image had flashed for a split second when he'd finished the restore and rebooted to test. He was already reaching for the trackpad to bring up the password prompt when the door had opened and an assistant had called Victoria to an emergency call. He'd logged out, double-checked the encryption, and rolled his cart out of there with a silent prayer he hadn't just broken some unspoken line. But the image had stuck in his brain, not because she was his billionaire boss, because she looked human. Now she was staring at him like he'd broken into her house. "You saw it this morning, didn't you?" she asked quietly. The air between them felt heavy. Ethan knew the safest answer. He'd been in corporate IT long enough to know the rules. You keep your head down. You say as little as possible. You pretend you never see anything except error logs and IP addresses. I saw it for a second, when the machine booted, he admitted, because for some reason lying suddenly felt worse. Then I pulled up the login screen. So you did see it. No surprise. Just confirmation. I'm sorry if that was. What did you think? She cut in. Silence hummed. He blinked. About the wallpaper? About the photograph, she said, each word precise. What went through your head when you saw it? Every alarm bell in Ethan's brain went off at once. This had to be some kind of test, right? HR nightmare bait. The company handbook had paragraphs about inappropriate comments, harassment, maintaining professional boundaries. He could feel his job slipping through his fingers like sand if he said any of the things men are never supposed to say to the CEO who signs the checks. But she was watching him with something beneath the steel, something like fear. He thought of Ava, his 8-year-old, sitting at the crooked kitchen table last night, coloring on the back of a past due notice while he pretended not to see the red stamp. He thought of the way she'd asked, "Do rich people ever get lonely?" after they'd passed a penthouse listing on the bus. Whatever this was, Victoria Hale wasn't lonely because she lacked opinions. The entire city had those. Maybe what she lacked was someone willing to give her one without an angle. Ethan took a breath. I thought. He glanced back at the screen, at the laughing woman who looked like she'd just finished painting that crooked 4 on the mailbox. I thought you looked like it was before everything got loud. She frowned. Loud? Before 100,000 people needed something from you every day, he said, the words coming slower now, less rehearsed, more dangerous. Before board meetings and press releases and whatever else comes with owning half the skyline. Her eyes didn't leave his face. You didn't think it was unprofessional? She asked, voice lower now. Inappropriate for a CEO's device to have a picture like that? I thought it was honest, he said, and I figured everyone deserves one honest thing on their own screen. The tick of the analog clock on the wall suddenly sounded very loud. Then she asked it, Do you think I'm pretty in that photo? He actually forgot how to breathe for half a second. What? It came out more like a cough. Her gaze didn't waver. It's a simple question, Mr. Cole. That version of me, she nodded at the screen. Does she look good? He wasn't prepared for the flicker in her voice on the word me. He could weasel out. Say something safe like, it's a nice photo, dodge the landmine. There were entire corporate training modules designed to help men avoid exactly this scenario. Or he could answer the question she was actually asking. Yes, he said, surprising himself. You look beautiful in it. Something in her posture went rigid, like she'd braced for impact and it hadn't come from the direction she expected. But, he added, it's got nothing to do with your hair or your face or whatever. He lifted one shoulder. It's because you look like you don't owe anyone anything in that moment, like you're allowed to just stand there and laugh. For the first time since he'd walked in, Victoria's gaze flicked away. Her jaw flexed. He'd gone too far. He knew it. He'd crossed some invisible line between fixing hardware and dissecting the soul of a woman who could end his mortgage hopes with a 2-word email. The smart move now was to apologize, wipe the machine, and find a job at a grocery store. Instead, the most powerful woman in the building exhaled a breath that sounded almost like relief. No one has said that to me in a long time, she murmured. That I looked like I didn't owe anyone anything. She closed the laptop with a careful click, reset the lock screen to standard corporate, and run a full security audit. If that image ever leaks, this company will be in the headlines for all the wrong reasons. Yes, ma'am, Ethan said quickly, grateful for an instruction that sounded like work. He moved around to the other side of the desk, fingers grateful for the familiar language of settings menus and security protocols. In less than a minute, the laughing woman and the crooked mailbox were gone, replaced by Hale Dynamics' dark blue logo and a generic gradient. He stepped back. It's done. Victoria's eyes lingered on the blank screen for a heartbeat, like she was searching for the ghost of the image beneath the pixels. You may go, she said. Ethan grabbed his backpack. His hand was actually shaking on the strap. He was almost at the door when she spoke again. Mr. Cole. He turned. Thank you, she said, for answering the question I actually asked. His mouth opened, closed. You're welcome, he managed. He stepped back out into the open office, the buzz of gossip and keyboards rushing at him like a wave. No one knew yet that everything in his life had just started to shift, and he had no idea that this 10-minute conversation, this minor IT ticket on a random Thursday, would put him in the center of a storm that would test every line he'd drawn between survival and integrity, or that the same woman who'd just asked if she was pretty would soon be asking him for something much harder, something that could cost him his job and his daughter's future. Before we go deeper into what happens next, if you enjoy emotional, real-life stories like this, take a moment to support the channel. Hit the like button so more people can find this video, subscribe to Lunio Stories so you don't miss the next episode, and drop a comment telling us where in the world you're watching from right now. All right, let's get back to the story. 3 hours earlier, before Victoria's laptop crashed, Ethan's day had started like most of his days, with an alarm he'd already slept through. Daddy. Something poked his cheek. Daddy, wake up! He opened one eye. A pair of brown eyes stared back at him from 2 inches away. Ava. His voice was sandpaper. Is the apartment on fire? She grinned, missing tooth and all. No. But the toaster almost was. He sat up so fast the world tilted. What? I unplugged it, she added quickly. Like you said. But the bagel turned black. Can we still eat it? He swung his legs off the sagging couch. Absolutely not. The sagging couch was his bed. The bedroom was for his daughter. That had been the easiest decision he'd ever made. He checked his phone. 3 new emails from the help desk system. One from the power company with final notice in the subject line. He didn't click that one. Why didn't you wake me when your alarm went off? He asked, shuffling toward the tiny kitchenette. I tried. Ava shrugged, hopping onto a chair and pulling her knees to her chest. She wore a unicorn t-shirt and leggings with one knee blown out. You said, 5 more worlds, she giggled, and then you snored. 5 more minutes, he corrected automatically, then frowned. He did not snore. Probably. The burnt bagel sat on the counter, a small, round hockey puck of char. He dropped it into the trash and reached for the bread with the unburnt side. You can't just eat half-burnt stuff, kiddo. That's science. That's wasteful, she countered, mimicking his serious voice. It made him snort. He dropped 2 new slices into the toaster and turned it down, eyeing it like it might combust. What time is your art club? He asked. After school. Ms. Jenkins said we're making clay animals today. Her voice softened with excitement. She's going to show us how to make them hollow so they don't explode in the oven. Exploding animals? Cool, he said, spreading peanut butter on the toast when it popped. Any word on the scholarship? She looked away, stabbing her fork into a strawberry. He heard the careful mimic of adult voices in her tone. The email they'd printed last week was still stuck to the fridge with a magnet from a pizza place. Thank you for your interest in our summer art intensive. We are reviewing applications and will notify recipients by... If she got in, it was 2 weeks of real art instruction. Real supplies. A campus on the north side with trees, and a studio where she'd be surrounded by kids who carried sketchbooks instead of iPads. If she didn't, he'd promised her they'd make their own art camp in the park. He'd Googled how to make paint from berries. He slid her plate across the table. "Still reviewing is better than no," he said. "Means you're still in the running." "Yeah." She brightened. "And if you get a promotion, we can buy real clay instead of the kind that cracks." He smiled for her. "A real one. If I get a promotion, we're buying a toaster that doesn't try to kill us." The word promotion hung between them like a joke they both pretended wasn't one. The truth was, in 3 years at Hale Dynamics, Ethan had never once applied for advancement. His managers liked him. His performance reviews said things like reliable, solid under pressure, takes initiative in crisis. But promotions meant visibility, presentations, being in rooms where people noticed if you spoke up. Being noticed meant someone might look at his address, at the one line in his HR file that said, "Emergency contact, none," at the note about full custody. It meant someone might call him into an office with an HR rep and say they'd reevaluated his fit. He couldn't risk that. Not when the health insurance that came with his boring, invisible job paid for Ava's asthma meds. Not when cheaper apartments came with mold and flickering exits and sirens at 3 a.m. So he stayed where he was, kept his head below the cubicle line, fixed what was broken, and went home. "Dad?" Ava's voice cut through his thoughts. "Are we still going to the art fair Saturday? If I don't get called in?" "Yeah," he said. Weekends were on-call rotation. 2 guys on, 1 guy off. 3 weeks ago, he'd traded shifts so he could be sure to make parent-teacher conferences. This weekend was supposed to be theirs. If a server didn't explode, if a billionaire's laptop didn't decide to take a nap. He checked the time. "We gotta leave in 10. Grab your backpack. Make sure your inhaler's in there, okay?" She hopped down, already mid-sentence about some classmate's new puppy as she vanished into the bedroom. He let himself look at the envelope on the counter then. White, thin. The return address of the hospital billing department. He hadn't opened it last night when he'd pulled it from the mailbox. He'd been too tired to absorb one more number he couldn't pay. He picked it up now, thumb sliding under the flap, tearing carefully like the paper might scream. 23. He closed his eyes. He could feel the weight of it sitting on his chest. If he let this slide much longer, they'd start calling his cell at work. They always did. They always chose the worst possible moments. He could live with the embarrassment of talking to collections in the alley on his lunch break. He could live with being hungry at the end of the month. What he couldn't live with was Ava coming home one day to find a notice on their door, or watching him beg a hospital clerk for just one more extension. "Daddy, my drawing." Her voice came from the doorway, bright, unaware. He shoved the envelope into his backpack behind his laptop. "Bring it," he said, forcing lightness into his voice. "Maybe I can hang it in my office." "You don't have an office," she pointed out, joining him at the door. She had her backpack, her sketchbook, and a lopsided paper crown she insisted on wearing for confidence. "I have half a desk, actually. Very luxurious. You have a plant, too," she added proudly. "The cactus." He thought of the grocery store cactus in the chipped mug on his desk, the one Ava had picked out because it looks like it survives without friends. "I do have the cactus," he agreed. They walked down 3 flights of stairs, the elevator hadn't worked since before they moved in, and out into the gray morning. On the bus, Ava pressed her nose to the window, narrating everything. The guy on the bike with no helmet, the woman walking 4 dogs, the girl with blue hair and headphones. When they passed the tall glass towers near the river, she jabbed his arm. "That's your building." Hale Dynamics' headquarters rose above the street, all mirrored glass and sharp corners. The logo, a stylized H inside a circle, glowed 3 stories high on the side. "You work way up there," Ava said, "like a spy." "I work on the 4th floor," he corrected. That's like spy trainee level. Do you ever see her? She asked. Who? The lady from the commercial. The one who said, "We don't just innovate." Ava deepened her voice in a decent imitation. You said she owns the building. Victoria Hale, he said. The commercials were everywhere. Subway stations, streaming services, billboards. A woman in a sleek suit looking straight into the camera as a voiceover talked about cloud solutions and integrated lives. I've seen her in the lobby, he admitted. Once. She had like 6 people around her. And a driver. She walks fast. Do you think she ever eats burnt bagels? Ava asked seriously. He laughed. Pretty sure people who own buildings have magic kitchens with bagel settings that know exactly when to pop. Ava considered that like it was a scientific fact. If I ever meet her, she said, I'm gonna ask if she likes unicorns. Please don't, he murmured, picturing his kid cornering a billionaire with questions about glitter. At the school, he knelt to her level while kids swarmed around them, backpacks bouncing. Text me if your inhaler gets low, he said. And if anybody gives you a hard time about your crown, you tell them your dad said it's an early prototype from a new fashion line. Very exclusive. She giggled. Okay, love you. Love you more. He watched her run toward her friends, crown slightly askew, arms already waving as she launched into some story. Then he walked back to the bus stop, the envelope heavy in his bag, the building growing closer with each stop. By 9:02, he was at his desk on the 4th floor, between the copy room and the emergency exit no one used. His office was 2 panels of beige fabric and a wobbly chair. His phone already had 3 blinking lights. Tickets. He logged in, scanned the list. Printer issues. Password resets. A VP couldn't connect to the Wi-Fi in the executive conference room. He should have expected the one that sat near the bottom, flagged red. Device failure. Priority 1. Executive. He clicked. The asset ID made his stomach tighten. Primary workstation, VH001. He stared at the screen. His manager leaned over the cubicle wall, coffee in hand. You saw that one? Yeah, Ethan said. You're up, his manager said. Security wants it done local, no remote access on that machine. And make sure you don't breathe wrong in there. You know how she gets when she's behind schedule. Ethan nodded, thumb already hovering over the accept ticket button. Maybe it would be a simple reboot. Maybe she wouldn't even be in the room. He clicked accept. He had no idea the laptop wasn't the thing that would crash that day. It was the walls Victoria Hale had spent 20 years building around herself, and that something as small as a private photo and an honest answer would be the match. But that discovery, and the offer she would make him 24 hours later, would force Ethan to choose between the anonymity that kept his daughter safe and the kind of visibility that could change hundreds of lives inside that glass tower, if he survived the fallout. The memory of Victoria's question had replayed in his head at least 50 times. Do you think I'm pretty in that photo? He tried to drown it under routine. He swapped 2 keyboards that someone had spilled soda into. He explained, again, that turning the machine off and on usually did help. He crawled under a desk to reroute a cable, while a marketing associate complained loudly on speakerphone about IT always breaking things. Every time his brain tried to drift back to the 20th floor, he forced it to the next ticket. By 5:30, half the cubicles on the 4th floor had emptied. The office lights hummed, automatic sensors not yet sure if everyone had gone home. Ethan shut down his terminal, grabbed his backpack, and headed for the elevator. He was thinking about spaghetti, cheap, filling, enough for leftovers. He was thinking about Ava's art club clay animals and whether they'd survived the kiln. He wasn't thinking about Victoria Hale. Not until his desk phone rang. The old beige one, the one that only rang from inside the building. He froze. He wasn't supposed to be at his desk. He'd already logged out. But the sound kept going, shrill and insistent. He could walk away, let it roll to voicemail, pretend he never heard it. Instead, he set his backpack down and picked up the receiver. "It's support. This is Ethan. Mr. Cole." The voice at the other end was crisp, efficient, practiced. "This is Diane from Executive Administration. Ms. Hale would like to see you in her office at 6 sharp. His hand tightened on the phone. Is there a technical issue with her machine?" "She didn't specify," Diane said. "She requested you by name." His pulse stumbled. "Requested him." Okay, he said. "I'll be there." He set the phone down like it might bite him. His manager passed by, pulling on his coat. "You heading out?" "In a bit," Ethan said, forcing his voice to stay level. "Got called upstairs." His manager's eyebrows rose. "To the 20th? "Yeah." "Do me a favor," his manager said under his breath. "Come back in one piece. I don't have the budget to replace you." The joke bounced off Ethan's chest without landing. He checked his watch. 5:38. If he texted Ava, she'd worry. Called into a meeting with the CEO wasn't the kind of thing you dropped on an 8-year-old whose biggest fear was people disappearing. He typed instead, "Running a little late. Save me a clay dinosaur if you made one. Love you." She replied within seconds, "It's a cat, not a dinosaur," and 3 heart emojis. He stared at the screen for a beat too long. Then he slung his backpack over one shoulder and walked to the elevator bank. The ride up felt slower this time. He watched the numbers creep. 5, 9, 12, 16. Every possible worst-case scenario marched through his head. HR complaint, inappropriate comment, breach of privacy. "We appreciate your service, but..." By 17, he'd calculated how long his savings, such as they were, would cover rent if he lost his job. Not long. By 19, he'd pictured Ava's face when he told her he'd be home a lot more now. The door slid open on 20 with a soft chime that felt too cheerful for his stomach. The carpet here was thicker, the lights softer, the walls lined with modern art that looked like colorful bruises. The receptionist at the front, Diane, probably, looked up from her monitor. "Mr. Cole?" she asked. He nodded. "You can go right in," she said, gesturing to the same glass door he'd walked through that morning. "She's expecting you." He knocked anyway. "Come," came the voice from inside. He stepped in, shutting the door with a soft click behind him. Victoria wasn't at her desk this time. She stood by the far window, arms folded, silhouetted against the fading skyline. The river below caught the last threads of daylight, orange and blue. "Sit," she said, still facing the glass. There were 2 chairs facing her desk. He chose the one on the right, sat down, and tried to keep his hands from knotting in his lap. He didn't speak. Talking first felt dangerous here. After a moment, she turned. The sharp suit from this morning was gone. She wore a black blouse, sleeves rolled to her elbows, no jacket. Her hair, still perfectly pulled back, gave away nothing. Her eyes, though, the dark underlines there told him she hadn't taken a break since he left. "I'm going to ask you something," she said, rounding the desk and sitting, "and I want you to answer without filtering. Understood?" I'll try," he said. Her mouth twitched briefly, then flattened. "This morning, when I asked your opinion on that photograph, why didn't you give me the answer you assumed I wanted?" He blinked. That's not what he'd expected. He'd prepared answers for policy violations, for misunderstandings, for why complimenting a photo wasn't meant as flirting. He hadn't prepared for this. "Because you already know what people are supposed to say," he said slowly. "You're you. If you ask someone if you look good, the script's kind of written. I didn't think you needed another script." She studied him for a long second. "Most people in this building," she said, have learned that telling me what they think I want to hear keeps their lives simple. I like simple lives, Ethan said, then immediately regretted it, for the record. Her eyes flickered. You have no ambition? He thought of rent, medical bills, a scholarship application on the fridge. I have an 8-year-old, he said. That's its own kind of ambition. One corner of her mouth tugged upward, just barely. Do you know how old I was when I started this company? She asked. I read once you were mid-20s, he guessed. 25, she said. 3 credit cards maxed out. $47 in my checking account. A friend's couch for an office. He could picture her then, sort of. Less armor, more caffeine, something like hunger in her eyes. Everyone thought I was insane, she went on. They told me to get a real job at someone else's company, to stop pretending I could build something that would compete with people twice my age. She glanced past him, like she was seeing that younger version of herself taped to some invisible wall. I spent years doing the opposite of what people thought was smart, she said, ignoring advice, making choices that terrified my parents. It worked. She gestured vaguely beyond the glass. Now every person in this building depends on me not making a single mistake. He wasn't sure where she was going, but he also knew better than to interrupt. Over time, she continued, people stopped telling me the truth, not just about how I look in old photographs, about products, about teams, about whether something is actually working. Her gaze sharpened on him. I didn't realize how bad it had gotten until a stranger in a navy polo looked at a picture on my laptop and told me I looked like I didn't owe anyone anything. He swallowed. I had my people pull your file, she said, no apology in her tone. 3 years at Hale Dynamics. Consistently strong reviews. Mandatory nights on call. No complaints filed. No requests for advancement. You clock in. You fix disasters, you clock out. It should have felt invasive. Maybe if someone else had admitted to going through his life like that, it would have. But coming from her, it felt like gravity. You live on the south side, she added. 2-bedroom walk-up. 1 child, sole custody. You've never been late on your health insurance premiums, even when you were behind on other bills. His chest tightened. Is any of that a problem? It's context, she said. You're what this company looks like when it's doing the bare minimum right. Stable, competent, invisible. The words stung, even though he'd chosen that posture on purpose. You kept your head down because you can't risk losing ground, she said, as if she'd followed his thoughts. You play small because small feels safer. He wanted to argue, to say there was dignity in quiet work. That not everyone wanted to stand on stages or stare down shareholders, but she wasn't exactly wrong. I didn't bring you up here to fire you, she said. He hadn't realized quite how much air he'd been holding in until his lungs unclenched. Okay, he said. It came out thinner than he meant. I also didn't bring you up here to talk about photographs, she added. I need you for something else. She opened a drawer and set a slim gray folder on the desk between them. There's a problem rotting this place from the inside, she said. I have numbers telling me everything's fine. Retention rates, engagement scores. And then there are the exit interviews that say something very different. She tapped the folder. People leave here burned out, resentful, convinced that we never saw them, that they were cogs, commodities, that all the talk about transforming lives stops at the client's door. He'd heard versions of that in the break room, in half-whispered conversations near the vending machines. When I ask my executives why, they blame market conditions and millennial expectations, she went on. When I ask HR, they show me anonymized summaries that smooth out the sharp edges until they're meaningless. So, you want, he ventured, eyebrows knitting, someone who can read the sharp edges? I want people who live with them, she corrected, who stand in drafty hallways fixing overheated machines while upstairs someone orders custom ergonomic chairs that cost more than your monthly rent. He thought of the third-floor microwave that had been broken for 4 months and the gleaming espresso machine he'd spotted in the executive lounge. "I'm putting together a small group," she said. "Cross-functional, confidential. We're going to dig into what's actually happening between floors. Then we're going to recommend structural changes I can force through before the board gets nervous." He stared at the folder. "And you want me on that group?" "Yes, I'm infrastructure support." "And infrastructure," she said calmly, "knows where all the cables really run." He almost laughed. He didn't. "Why me?" he asked instead. "You have entire departments for this. Consultants. They've all been trained to tell me the same thing," she said. "You haven't." His throat went dry. "My assistant will handle scheduling," she added. "The team will meet twice a week after normal hours. Interviews, data analysis, listening. It will be in addition to your current duties." He did some quick math in his head. "So, extra hours, after 5. Yes. Will it change my role?" he asked. "Officially? For now, no. You'll remain in your current position. On paper. On paper." The words left a strange taste in his mouth. "And compensation?" he asked, forcing the practical question past the swirl in his chest. "Because if I'm paying more for after-school care—" 15% increase to base salary," she said. "Retroactive to the beginning of the month, plus a completion bonus if we hit the implementation milestones." He blinked. 15%. That was the power bill off his neck. A chunk into the hospital debt instead of just minimums. Actual clay instead of dough that cracked. He could almost see Ava at the art store, arms full of colors. But that was the sweet part. There was always a catch. "You understand what this would mean," she said, sitting in rooms with people who make decisions about budgets and layoffs, saying things they may not want to hear, saying them in front of me. His chest tightened. "If I tell you something you don't like, I'd be telling the person who controls whether or not my kid keeps her inhaler. Do you think I'd ask you here just to punish you for telling me the truth?" she asked quietly. He thought of her face when he'd described the photo, the way her shoulders had dropped half an inch, like someone had finally taken one brick off a pile she'd been carrying for years. He shook his head. "I don't think that's who you are. But I don't know you." For a beat, her expression softened. "That's fair." He looked down at the folder again. It felt heavier than paper. Asked for by name. Hand-picked. Offered a raise bigger than any he'd ever gotten at once. And all he had to do was trade his safety in the shadows for a seat at a table where people noticed when you spoke. "Can I think about it?" he asked. She nodded once. "Of course. Take the weekend. Tell Diane your answer by Monday morning." He reached for the folder. The smooth cardboard was cool under his fingers. He thought he should say something professional. "Thank you for the opportunity. I'm honored." All the lines people rehearsed for moments like this. Instead, his mouth did something different. "Whatever you build," he said, "it won't fix everything if the people who work here still feel like they can't bother speaking about microwaves, or parking garage lights, or photos on their bosses' screens." She stilled. "Parking lights?" "Just example," he said quickly, ears heating. "A guy on 4 logged a ticket about how dark the far end of the garage is at night. We escalated it. Facilities said they'd look into it. That was 7 months ago." The muscles in her jaw moved. "How many other suggestions have died like that?" she asked, more to herself than to him. "A lot," he said. "People still complain. They just stop putting it in writing." She leaned back in her chair. eyes tracing something unseen on the ceiling. Then, very quietly, she said, "This is exactly why I need you there." He stood. At the door, he hesitated. "You should put the photo somewhere that's just for you," he said, the words out before he'd fully decided to say them. "Not on a company device. Somewhere you can't be forced to erase it for PR." She looked up sharply. "Why?" she asked. "Because you looked happy," he said simply. "And it sounded like you don't have a lot of proof of that lying around." He didn't wait for her answer. He stepped out into the hallway, pulse hammering, folder under his arm like contraband. He had no idea she'd sit there long after he left, her fingers on the closed laptop, thinking about a crooked mailbox and a version of herself who'd believed she could build something without turning into a brand. Or that she'd open her desk drawer, pull out a worn paper copy of that same photo, and slide it into her wallet for the first time in years. Downstairs on the bus ride home, Ava peppered him with questions about clay cats and why glaze made them shiny. He listened, really listened, the way he hadn't that morning. When she fell asleep that night, marker still smudged on her fingertips, Ethan sat at the kitchen table and opened the gray folder. The first page was a project overview. The second, a timeline. The third, a list of objectives with bullet points like measurable improvement in perceived psychological safety and flattening non-essential hierarchies. Tucked between page 5 and 6 was a small, handwritten note. In neat, angled script, "Thank you for seeing me. H." He read it 3 times. Then he closed the folder, switched off the kitchen light, and lay awake on the sagging couch, staring at the ceiling. Some people would kill for a chance like this. A raise, a voice. Others would run from it, clinging to the safety of being nobody important. He didn't yet know which one he was, but by Monday morning, he would have to decide. And his answer would determine not just his own future, but the way hundreds of invisible people moved through that building. People a billionaire had finally realized she'd stopped seeing. Monday came faster than it had any right to. The weekend blurred into errands and dollar store groceries and an art fair they almost missed when a network alert dragged Ethan back to his laptop for an hour. On Sunday night, he spread the project papers across the kitchen table again. Ava sat opposite him, drawing a dragon with wings made of clouds. "You're thinking so loud," she said without looking up. "I am not," he said, jotting a question mark beside semi-structured interviews at all levels. "You get this line thing here," she traced between her eyebrows, "like you're trying to do math without a pencil." "It's adult math," he said. "They don't even make pencils for it." She colored in another wing. "Is it about money?" "Kind of." "Are we going to have to move?" she asked, voice going lighter in that way kids had when they were trying to sound like something didn't matter. He set his pen down. "Why would you think that?" "Because last time you stared at papers like that for days, you said we might have to move to a more affordable place." She wrinkled her nose at the word. "And I had to say bye to Ms. Ramirez and the cat next door." He remembered. Different envelope, different late fee, same nausea. "We're not moving," he said. "Not unless it's somewhere with a pool and a balcony and a kitchen that doesn't try to set breakfast on fire." She tilted her head. "So, good math?" "Complicated math," he said. "There's this thing at work. It might mean I'm gone a little more in the evenings." "Like late?" she cut in. "Past my bedtime?" "Sometimes," he said. "But Mrs. Owens downstairs said she could hang out with you when that happens. She has that big TV, remember? And the dog who thinks he's a pillow." Ava brightened at the mention of the dog. "Are you going to get more money if you do it?" He hesitated. "Maybe," he said. "But it's not just about that. It's about trying to make work less terrible." "For everybody?" she asked. "Or just for you?" "Everybody, I think," he said. She considered that, chewing on the end of her marker cap. Then you should do it, she said finally. Even if it's scary. That's what Ms. Jenkins says. If you can make something better and you don't, that's like not picking up trash when you see it. He smiled. She sounds very wise. She has like 7 plants that are still alive, Ava said seriously. She knows things. He looked back at the folder. He didn't tell her about the other side of the equation, that making lightning rods for other people's storms meant putting yourself on the roof, that visible people got struck more often. Ethan stood by the executive admin desk on the 20th floor again. Diane looked up from her screen. Mr. Cole? He nodded. Can you tell Ms. Hale, I'll take the spot, on the, group? Her eyes warmed just slightly. She'll be glad to hear that. First session is tonight at 6 in Conference 20C. Can you make that? He thought of Mrs. Owens's text from last night. Of course, honey. I love having Ava. She keeps Bingo from eating my slippers. Yes, he said. I can make it. After work, he dropped Ava at Mrs. Owens's apartment with a backpack, an inhaler, and strict instructions to go to bed on time. Are you going to be in the fancy floor? Ava asked, standing in the doorway in socks. Something like that, he said. Tell the lady I said hi, she called as he walked down the hall. I'm not telling the billionaire my kid says hi, he muttered under his breath, then immediately pictured it. Okay, maybe. M felt different than it had in the morning, quieter. The usual flood of suits heading to elevators had slowed to a trickle. The big glass doors to the main boardroom sat closed, lights off. Conference room 20C was smaller, at the very end of the hallway. Its glass walls were frosted halfway up, leaving privacy, but not secrecy. 3 people sat around the long table when he arrived. He recognized one, Liam, from legal. Or was it Luke? He'd seen the man's name on an email once. General counsel. The kind of person you never wanted copied on your correspondence. The other 2 were strangers. A woman in her 30s with a HR badge and a messy bun, scrolling through something on a tablet. A guy with rolled-up sleeves and a notebook, pen already moving. They all looked up when Ethan slipped in. You must be Ethan, the HR woman said, standing to offer a hand. I'm Carla, People Operations. Ethan, he confirmed, shaking. Infrastructure. The man with the notebook stood as well. Noah. Operations. His grip was firm, his smile easy. I've seen your name on the on-call schedule. You're the one who's always on when the servers decide to die at 2 in the morning. That's me, Ethan said. We're very close. The legal guy closed his folder. Mark Townsend, he said. General Counsel, I'm here to make sure none of the ideas you brilliant people suggest get us sued into oblivion. Ethan gave a weak chuckle. He tried not to notice the differences between them and him. Their shirts looked like they'd never seen the inside of a bargain bin. Their confidence filled the space like furniture. He took the seat closest to the door. The door opened again at exactly 6. Victoria walked in, a slim leather portfolio under one arm. No entourage, no assistant. Everyone started to rise. She waved a hand. Sit. This isn't a board meeting. She took the head of the table. Thank you all for being here, she said. You were chosen because each of you sees this company from a different vantage point. Carla, you see the reasons people quit before they're filtered through PR. Noah, you see where policies meet reality and fall apart. Mark, you see risk, sometimes where the rest of us don't. Her gaze landed on Ethan, and Ethan sees everything the rest of us have learned to ignore. Every head turned his way. His neck warmed. I'm just the guy who gets yelled at when Outlook doesn't sync, he said, trying to keep it light. Exactly, she said. You hear what people say when they're frustrated, exhausted, backed into corners by systems we built without them in mind. She opened her portfolio, sliding out a sheaf of papers. The goal is simple and impossible. Make this a place where people do not have to destroy themselves to earn a paycheck. Ambitious, Mark murmured. Necessary, she shot back. They spent the first 20 minutes laying ground rules. Confidentiality. No note-taking on personal devices. No discussing specifics with anyone outside the room. If something needed follow-up in another department, it would go through Carla or Noah. Nothing we hear here, Victoria said, ends up verbatim in a review or a reprimand. This is not a trap. Ethan believed her. Mostly. We'll be conducting listening sessions, Carla said. Voluntary, confidential, across levels. We'll start with a pilot. See who signs up. Expand from there. Will people trust that it's actually confidential if they see the CEO hovering nearby? Noah asked. Which is why I won't be in those sessions, Victoria said. You will. I'll only see anonymized summaries unless someone explicitly asks to speak to me. So, we're middle people, Noah summed up. Translators. Lightning rods, Victoria said. You'll be taking hits meant for me and sending them up in a form I can act on. Ethan's stomach clenched at the word hits. At one point, Victoria turned to him directly. Ethan, from your position, what do you wish someone in my chair understood about life below floor 10? The question landed like a weight. He could deflect. Say something safe about communication or resources. Or he could do the thing she'd brought him here to do and say what he actually thought. He glanced at the others. Carla's expression was open, curious. Noah tapped his pen, ready. Mark watched with that legal stillness that seemed like nothing and everything at once. Most of the people I work near, Ethan said slowly, don't think anyone up here wants the full story. They think you want digestible pieces, stuff that sounds fixable in a slide deck. Noah's pen paused. Carla shifted in her chair. Example, Ethan went on. There was a security guard on nights who filed a complaint about a manager who kept making comments about his accent. HR followed up. The manager got a talking to. The guard got his hours cut the next schedule. Carla winced. What do people think happened? Victoria asked. They think the guard got punished for speaking up. They think the manager talked his way out of it, Ethan said. So the next time someone gets comments, they don't bother filling out forms. They just take it. Or quit. Victoria's knuckles whitened around her pen. How many stories like that? She asked quietly. Have you heard and never reported? He hesitated. Dozens. She closed her eyes for a second. Some of those may have been handled poorly, Mark said. But you know I can't comment on specific. We're not here to argue the legal record, Victoria cut in. We're here to understand the emotional one. She looked back at Ethan. What else? He took a breath. Little stuff, mostly. The third-floor break room has been down to one microwave for months. Someone from finance went upstairs to ask if they could borrow one of the extras from the executive lounge. There are like 3 up there no one uses. Carla closed her eyes. God, individually that kind of thing sounds petty, Ethan said. Microwaves, parking lights, comments. But when it's every day, it piles up. And then they get a company-wide email about our family culture, Noah added dryly. Victoria's jaw tightened. Thank you, she said to Ethan. Don't censor the petty. That's what it looks like before it turns into lawsuits and attrition. 2 hours later, his brain felt like scrambled code. As they wrapped up, Victoria gave them their first assignment. Each was to draft a list of 10 questions they wanted to ask employees in different tiers: entry-level, mid-management, long-term staff, recent hires. Not the questions you think I want, she clarified. The ones you'd actually ask if you didn't have to perform. On his way out, as the others filtered to the elevators, Victoria caught up to Ethan in the hallway. You did well, she said. I mostly complained about microwaves and managers, he said. You named the rot, she countered. And you did it without dramatics. That's useful. They walked in silence for a few steps. How's your daughter? She asked suddenly. He glanced at her. Good. Obsessed with dragons lately. And Clay. Art kid? She asked. Yeah. Does she want to do that professionally? There was something careful in her voice. She's 8, he said. Right now she wants to be an astronaut veterinarian artist. I'm not narrowing it down yet. For the first time, he saw her smile reach her eyes. At 8, she said, I wanted to own a candy store and a spaceship. Sometimes I think I got halfway there. They stopped at the elevator bank. Why did you really say yes? She asked before the doors opened. He could have said money, the raise, the hospital bill. Instead, he heard himself answer, because my kid told me if I can make something less trash and don't, that's kind of on me. One side of her mouth lifted. Smart kid. Terrifying, he agreed. The elevator arrived. The doors slid open. She didn't get in. You're on 4, right? She asked. Yeah. I'm heading down, she said. Different elevator. Less chance of spontaneous performance reviews. He stepped inside. Ethan, she said as the doors began to close. He looked up. The next few weeks may get uncomfortable, she said. For you. For the people you work near. If at any point you feel like the cost to your daughter is too high, you tell me. Not HR, not your manager. Me. He held her gaze. Got it. The doors slid shut. On the 4th floor, his cubicle looked the same. Beige panels, cactus in a mug, a sticky note from Ava that read, You can do hard things in wobbly purple letters. He sat down heavily. Some people would say he'd just walked into a trap. That standing between angry employees and the woman who signed their checks was asking to get hit from both sides. Others would say this was his shot, his chance to drag some light into the places where wiring had been left exposed. He looked at the sticky note again. What would you have done? Would you have stayed small, kept your head down, told yourself someone else would fix it? Or would you have stepped into the discomfort, even with rent and inhalers on the line? He didn't know yet if he'd made the right call. He only knew there was no neat rollback button for this kind of change. The only way out was through. And on the 20th floor, a billionaire who'd learned to live without being seen was about to find out what it felt like to stand under the same fluorescent lights as everyone else. For better, or for much, much worse. The first feedback session that really broke Ethan came on a rainy Wednesday. He sat in a small 3rd-floor conference room with a plastic sign on the door. Listening session. Confidential. No names. No retaliation. A woman from customer support sat across from him, hands twisted in her lap. I was supposed to be with my dad when he had heart surgery, she said. My supervisor told me if I took the day, I'd send the wrong message about commitment, so I watched the live updates on my phone between calls instead. Ethan had practiced keeping his face neutral. This time, his jaw clenched. I'm sorry, he said quietly. Did anyone higher up know that was the reason? She laughed once, sharp. I tried to tell HR. They said they'd coach him. Next schedule, I lost my preferred shift. 2 days later, a cleaner in a faded uniform whispered about a manager who kept touching her shoulder when no one was around. I told someone, she said. So I work around his floor. I lose hours. He still works days. Ethan wrote bullet points after each session, anonymized, no names. Still, he could hear every voice when he tried to sleep. At the next project meeting, he spread his notes on the table. Carla from HR had her own stack. Noah from operations had fill-in charts. Mark from legal had that tight look around his eyes. Victoria scanned a page, her mouth flattening. They're punishing people for speaking up, she said, quietly, off the record. It's not everywhere, Carla protested. But yeah, it's happening more than any of our dashboards show. Legally, we have policies. Mark added. On paper, we're covered. But if managers are getting creative with shifts and assignments, that's still retaliation. Ethan cut in, surprising himself. Doesn't matter what you call it. The room fell silent. Victoria looked up, met his eyes, and for once didn't hide the flicker of shame there. What would you do, she asked him, if you were sitting in my chair? He almost said, I'd quit. It was a reflex born of exhaustion. Instead, he answered slower. I'd make it clear that cutting someone's hours after they complain is a career-ending move. I'd fix something small and visible right away so people knew talking wasn't pointless. And I'd stop pretending we didn't know is an excuse. Her pen moved. Then that's where we start, she said. Within 2 weeks, the far corner of the company parking garage, the one everyone avoided, was bright as day. No announcement, just new LED lights humming overhead. On the 3rd floor, 2 brand-new microwaves appeared with a plain note. Use freely. Facilities. People joked, took pictures. Microwave miracle, someone wrote in the company chat. But underneath the jokes, Ethan saw something else in their faces. Suspicious hope. The little things matter, Noah said, watching a crowd around the new machines. If they believe those can change, maybe they'll believe the big things can too. The big things came slower. A blunt email from Victoria and Mark laid out a new anti-retaliation policy in plain English. Complaints would now be reviewed by a mixed panel, including someone from another department, and any shift changes within 60 days would be audited. In one-on-one follow-ups, a few managers rolled their eyes. So now we're the villains? One muttered. Only if you act like it, Ethan muttered back under his breath. Not everyone was thrilled with him either. One afternoon, his manager pulled him aside by the server room. You're doing good work, the man said. Just watch your back. Some directors aren't used to having the mirror held up. Ethan swallowed. I'm not trying to start a war. His manager huffed a laugh. You already did. You just picked the right general. That night, after another session full of hard stories, Ethan dragged himself to the elevator. Victoria fell into step beside him, looking as wrung out as he felt. Still think this was a good idea? She asked. He thought about lying. Yeah, he said. I do, even if it sucks. She almost smiled. You know the odd part? She said. I thought this was about helping them. She nodded vaguely downwards. Turns out it's forcing me to admit how many things I stopped seeing years ago. Like the photo, he said quietly. Like the photo, she echoed. The elevator doors opened. They didn't step in yet. How's your daughter? She asked. Terrified of public speaking, fearless about dragons, he said. She got the art camp scholarship. Victoria's head snapped toward him. They told you? She screamed so loud the neighbor's dog had opinions, Ethan said. Good, she murmured. She deserves a room where people actually look at what she makes. Kind of like you, he said, nodding toward her portfolio. She gave him a long, measuring look. No one ever talked to me like this when I was building this place, she said. They either worshipped me or tried to tear me down. No one just treated me like someone who could be wrong. To be fair, he said, stepping into the elevator now, most people who can fire you with one email don't advertise their soft spots. She hit the lobby button, expression unreadable. Maybe it's time they did, she said. 3 months into the project, the team gathered for what was supposed to be a final recommendations meeting. The table was covered in charts and lists, revised grievance processes, anonymous reporting tools, manager training schedules, budget requests for simple things like functioning coffee machines and bus passes for late-night staff. It's solid, Mark said, tapping the stack. Defensible, responsible. It's also very top-down. Noah added. We're still asking people to trust the same folks who ignored them before. That's what I've been thinking, Victoria said quietly. She closed her portfolio and looked at Ethan. You said once you stay small because you can't risk losing ground, she said. That you hide in infrastructure because invisibility is safer. Sounds like something I'd say, he muttered. I've spent 20 years surrounded by people who feel very safe being big, she went on. Most of them look like me, talk like me, live nothing like the people on the help desk or the night cleaning crew. She slid a thin envelope out from under her notes and placed it in front of him. His name was on it, typed, official. He didn't move. What's that? He asked slowly. An offer, she said. Associate Director, Employee Experience and Infrastructure. Half your time on systems, half on making sure whatever we build here doesn't go back to sleep in a year. His chest squeezed. That's a real job. It is, she said. With a real raise, real influence, and real risk. He stared at the envelope. He could almost see the zeros through the paper. He could also see all the invisible lines between one of us and one of them, between safe and exposed. If I take this, he said, people downstairs might see me as a traitor. Some might, she said. Others might see a door open that they never thought existed. And if I mess it up? He asked. If I freeze in some meeting and say the wrong thing and… You will, she said simply. Mess up, freeze, say the wrong thing. So will I. That's not the question. He looked up. Then what is? Will you keep going anyway? She asked. Or will you run back to the shadows the first time someone important frowns at you? He thought of Ava's sticky note on his old cubicle wall. You can do hard things. He thought of the cleaner twisting her hands, the security guard watching his hours, the exhausted support rep tracking her dad's surgery from a break room. He thought of Victoria herself, standing in front of that photo of a laughing younger woman, asking a stranger if she was pretty because she no longer trusted anyone else's answers. I didn't sign up to be… This, he said, fingers ghosting the envelope. I just fixed your laptop. That's how most revolutions start, she said dryly. Something breaks. Someone fixes it different than expected. Silence stretched. He imagined saying no, going back to the 4th floor, to forgotten microwaves and ghost complaints, telling himself he'd done his part, that someone braver, richer, less breakable would take it from here. He imagined saying yes, late nights, hard meetings, his name on memos, people expecting him to actually make a dent. Some would call him foolish either way. What would you do? He asked suddenly. If you were me. She blinked, surprised. Frankly, I'd take the job. Then I'd use it to make sure nobody else ever has to choose between their kid's inhaler and telling the truth at work. He let out a breath he hadn't realized he'd been holding. Okay, he said. Then, yes. Yes? She repeated. He nodded once. Yeah, I'll do it. For the first time, she didn't look like the woman from the billboards. She looked relieved, maybe even proud. She stood and held out her hand. He shook it, feeling the shift settle between them. No longer just CEO and IT guy. Something messier. Partners in a problem that wouldn't be solved by one policy or one promotion, but needed both. Just remember, he said, releasing her hand. I'm still the guy who knows when your laptop's about to die. Good, she said. I need someone who'll tell me before it crashes, even when it's me. 6 months later, Hale Dynamics didn't look like a different company from the outside. There were still long hours, crises, temper flare-ups in conference rooms. But inside, in small, steady ways, the current had shifted. A janitor reported a supervisor's comments and, instead of losing shifts, watched that supervisor walk out with a severance packet. A single mom in billing was able to switch to a flexible schedule without being told she wasn't leadership material. The microwaves kept working. On the 18th floor, a new nameplate appeared on a glass door. Ethan Cole, Associate Director, Employee Experience and Infrastructure. He split his days between cables and conversations, tickets and trust. He got things wrong. He apologized. He tried again. Sometimes, when the politics got thick and the resistance loud, he'd slip down to the 3rd floor and stand by the old break room. He'd watch someone heat up lunch without having to wait 20 minutes. It sounds ridiculous, but each ding of a functioning microwave felt like a tiny bell of victory. At home, Ava hung her art camp certificate above the couch and started sketching ideas for a mural about people being brave at work. When he told her his new title, she wrinkled her nose. "That's long," she said. "Can I just tell people you make sure they don't get squished?" "Honestly," he said, "that's probably the best description yet." Across town, in a sleek penthouse, Victoria added a new photo to the shelf beside the old one. In it, she stood with a group of employees in the lobby, some in suits, some in polos, some in cleaning uniforms. Cutting a ribbon on a childcare center Hale Dynamics had opened on the 1st floor. Her hair was still neat, her suit still sharp, but the smile on her face looked a lot more like the one from the brick house photo. Less brand, more person. Stories like this don't end with perfection. There will always be bad managers and broken systems. There will always be people too scared or too tired to speak up. But every time someone chooses honesty over comfort, every time a person with power listens instead of defending, the gap shrinks a little. One honest answer to a strange question about a private photo turned into a new job, a safer company, and a CEO learning to see herself and her people without the armor. If you've ever felt invisible at work or been afraid to say what you really think because of what it might cost, I hope this story reminded you. Your voice matters more than you know. Sometimes, the whole room is just waiting for one person to tell the truth. If you want to hear more true-to-life stories like this, about quiet courage, hidden kindness, and people who choose what's right even when it's hard, make sure to subscribe to Lunio Stories. Hit the like button if this touched you, share it with someone who needs a little hope today, and tell us in the comments, would you have taken that job or stayed invisible? Your stories and your thoughts are what keep this channel alive.